The night was dark and heavy when the soldiers came. Their boots pounded the earth like drums of war. Torches blazed in their hands, turning the peaceful street into a battlefield of shadows and screams. Kwame Kani, known to everyone as KK, sat in his father's mansion when he heard the gates explode. Metal twisted. Wood splintered. Voices barked orders like hungry dogs. His mother ran from the kitchen, her wrapper loose, her face frozen in terror. "What is happening?" she cried. Before KK could answer, soldiers surrounded him. 6 men with hard faces and harder hearts. Their guns pointed at his chest. One grabbed his arm and pulled him roughly to his feet. "Kwame Kani, you are under arrest." "For what crime?" KK asked calmly, though his heart hammered against his ribs. They did not answer. They dragged him toward the gate like a criminal. His mother collapsed, screaming his name. His father stood paralyzed, too shocked to move. Neighbors watched from dark windows, too afraid to help. As they threw KK into the back of a military truck, one soldier leaned close. His breath smelled of alcohol and hatred. "At sunrise," he whispered, "you will die." The truck doors slammed shut. Darkness swallowed him whole. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. The truck drove through empty streets. No music. No laughter. Only the sound of tires on broken roads and KK's breathing in the darkness. They took him underground. Down stone steps slick with water and old fear. Down into a place where hope came to die. At the bottom stood a heavy wooden door scarred with age. A soldier pushed it open. Inside was a small room lit by flickering candles. 7 men sat behind a long table covered in official papers. They wore dark robes like judges, but their faces looked nervous. Guilty. Not one of them would meet KK's eyes. KK stood alone in the center. No chair. No lawyer. No witnesses to speak for him. Just him and the shadow of a verdict already written. The oldest judge, a man with gray hair and dead eyes, cleared his throat. His voice sounded rehearsed, mechanical. "Kwame Kani, alias KK, you have been brought before this tribunal to answer for crimes against the nation of Ashajiria." KK said nothing. He knew this was not justice. This was theater. A performance designed to destroy him legally. "Do you understand the charges against you?" another judge asked, his hands trembling slightly. KK lifted his chin. His voice was steady as stone. "I understand that you are afraid of the truth." The judges shifted uncomfortably. One dropped his pen. 3 years earlier, everything had been different. KK had just returned home from abroad. He came back educated, polished, full of dreams for his country. His father, a wealthy businessman respected throughout Ashajiria, welcomed him with a grand celebration. The entire neighborhood came. There was music, dancing, and food enough to feed the whole street. KK wore simple clothes despite his wealth. He smiled easily and shook hands with everyone, from the richest merchant to the poorest beggar. People loved him because he treated everyone with dignity. One evening, his father called him to sit under the mango tree in their compound. The old man's face was serious, weighted with something unspoken. "My son, you have seen the world. You have learned much. But now it is time to see your own home." KK frowned. "Father, I am home." His father shook his head slowly. "No. You are in Mohona, the capital. But Ashajiria is bigger than this city. There are places you must see. Places that have been forgotten." "What do you mean?" The old man sighed deeply. "Go to the lower plains. Go and see where your mother's people come from. See what has been done to them over the decades." KK promised he would go. The next morning, a traveling merchant who knew his father offered to take him. As they prepared to leave, the merchant spoke quietly, his eyes distant. Prepare your heart, young man. What you see will change you forever. The lower plains stretched wide beneath the morning sun. Keke had expected poverty. He had expected suffering and despair. But what he found shocked him in a different way. He saw brilliance, creativity, industry. The plains people were traders, artisans, builders, and innovators. Women wove cloth so beautiful it could be sold in any capital city. Men crafted furniture with skill that rivaled foreign craftsmen. Young people ran businesses with sharp minds and ambitious hearts. But he also saw abandonment. Roads were broken, full of holes that could swallow a car. Markets had no roofs, forcing traders to walk under the burning sun. Schools had no books, no desks, no teachers. Children walked miles just to fetch dirty water from contaminated streams. Keke walked through the market slowly, his expensive shoes collecting dust. People stared at him. His clothes were too clean. His presence too foreign. He did not belong here. An old woman selling tomatoes called out to him. You look lost, stranger. I am not lost, Keke replied. I am searching. Searching for what? For understanding. She laughed bitterly, a sound like broken glass. Understanding. We have been searching for that from the government for 30 years. They have no answers for us. A small boy, barefoot and thin, tugged Keke's sleeve. His eyes were large and questioning. Are you from Mohono? Yes. The boy's face changed. Sadness filled his young eyes. Then why did you abandon us? That night, Keke could not sleep. He stayed in a small guest house with thin walls. Through them, he heard families talking, babies crying, mothers singing tired lullabies. He lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, the boy's question echoing in his mind. Why did you abandon us? He had learned the truth from the merchant. For decades, the government had systematically marginalized the lower plains. They collected taxes but provided nothing in return. They blocked business permits for plains entrepreneurs. They delayed infrastructure projects endlessly. They made success nearly impossible. Why? Because the plains people were different. They came from a different ethnic group. They spoke a different dialect. They supported opposition parties. So the government punished them with silence. With neglect. With calculated cruelty disguised as policy. Keke sat up, his chest tight with emotion. Guilt crashed over him like a wave. His entire life, he had lived in luxury in Mohono, never knowing that his own people, his mother's people, were suffering just hours away. Tears filled his eyes. His hands trembled. He felt shame deeper than any he had known. He whispered into the darkness of that small room, his voice breaking with conviction. I must do something. I cannot walk away from this. I will not. And in that moment, a fire was lit inside his soul. A fire that would burn until his last breath. Keke did not waste time with empty promises. Within weeks, he returned to the lower plains with resources, connections, and determination. He started carefully but boldly. He founded 10 young traders, giving them capital to expand their struggling businesses. He hired workers to repair the worst section of the main market road so trucks could finally deliver goods. He purchased textbooks and school supplies, sending them to 3 primary schools that had nothing. The plains people were stunned. No one from Mohono had ever done this. No government official had ever cared. No wealthy person had ever looked their way. Word spread like wildfire through the markets. Keke has returned, they said. Keke is helping us. Mothers blessed his name in their prayers. Fathers shook his hand with tears streaming down their weathered faces. Children ran after him in the dusty streets, shouting joyfully, Uncle Keke. Uncle Keke. He opened a small office in the market square. Every day, people came with their problems, their dreams, their desperation. And KK listened. Really listened. He did not promise what he could not deliver. But when he made a promise, he kept it. One afternoon, 5 young women came to him. They had started a tailoring business but had no sewing machines to grow. KK smiled warmly. How many machines do you need? 5, they whispered nervously. You will have them by next week. They wept with gratitude, hugging each other in disbelief. But in the shadows nearby, someone watched. A man in a dark coat, sent by the government. He took notes. He took photographs. He reported everything back to Mohono. In the capital city of Mohono, in a gleaming government building with marble floors and cold air conditioning, an emergency meeting was underway. 5 ministers sat around a polished conference table. Their faces were tight with concern. Their voices were low and sharp. They were discussing a problem. A problem named Kwame Kani. The Minister of Regional Affairs slammed his fist on the table, rattling water glasses. How is it that a private citizen is doing more for the lower plains than our entire ministry? The Minister of Finance leaned back, stroking his beard thoughtfully. It makes us look incompetent. Worse, it makes us look cruel. The youngest minister, a woman with calculating eyes, added coldly, he is becoming too popular. The plains people worship him. If this continues, they will start believing they deserve equal treatment. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. That was the real fear. Not that KK was helping people. But that he was awakening something dangerous, hope. Dignity. The belief that change was possible. The oldest minister, a man with silver hair and a politician's smile, spoke slowly, deliberately. Then we must stop him. Before he unites them completely. How? Someone asked nervously. The old minister's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. Quietly. Legally. We will use the law itself to destroy him. We will make him look dangerous. We will turn the people against him before we strike. They all nodded in agreement. The plan was set. The trap was being built. Outside the window, the sun set over Mohono, beautiful and golden. But inside that room, darkness was growing. KK remained unaware of the conspiracy forming against him. He was too focused on the work, too consumed with helping his people, too filled with hope to notice the shadows closing in. He launched the Plains Commerce Academy, a free training program for young entrepreneurs. They learn business management, accounting, marketing, and leadership skills. Within 6 months, over 200 young people had graduated, their eyes bright with possibility. Markets began expanding rapidly. Traders who once sold goods from torn mats now operated from proper wooden stalls. Farmers who had struggled to sell their crops now had buyers competing for their produce. Small factories opened. New shops appeared. The lower plains was transforming. People began dreaming again. Mothers enrolled their daughters in school for the first time. Fathers taught their sons valuable traits. The very air felt different, alive with energy and ambition. One peaceful evening, KK sat alone in his office reviewing project plans when something slid quietly under his door. He looked up, saw the folded paper, and walked over to pick it up. It was a letter. No name. No return address. Just a few words written in hurried, frightened handwriting. Be careful. They are watching you from Mohono. They will not let this continue. Protect yourself. Please. KK read it twice, his stomach tightening with unease. He walked to the window and looked out at the busy market. Children played. Women laughed. Men walked with purpose. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. He would not stop. He could not stop. These people had waited too long for hope. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered a warning he could not ignore. You are not safe. 2 weeks later, an official letter arrived at Keke's office. It bore the government seal. The language was polite and formal, but Keke recognized it for what it truly was, a summons. He was to appear before the Regional Development Committee in Mohono immediately. Keke traveled to the capital the next morning. He entered the imposing government building, his footsteps echoing through the silent marble hallways. He was led into a large conference room where 5 ministers waited. They greeted him with smiles and handshakes. They offered him tea and biscuits. They called him brother and son of Ashejiria. But their eyes told a different story. Their eyes were cold, calculating, predatory. The Minister of Regional Affairs spoke first, his voice smooth as oil. Keke, we are truly impressed by your philanthropic work in the plains. Very impressed. But we have some concerns. What concerns? Keke asked calmly, though tension coiled in his chest. You are moving too fast. The people are becoming overly excited. Emotional. This kind of rapid change can lead to instability. Keke frowned. Helping people causes instability. The finance minister leaned forward, his smile tight. We are not asking you to stop. We are asking you to slow down. Walk through government channels. Let us take the lead on development. Keke understood perfectly. They wanted control. They wanted credit. They wanted him invisible. He took a slow breath and spoke respectfully but firmly. With all due respect, ministers, the government has had decades to help the plains. I will continue my work. The room fell silent. The ministers exchanged meaningful glances. The oldest one leaned back and muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear, arrogant boy. Keke left the building with steady steps, but his hands trembled. The plains people had been patient for generations. Silent for too long. After hearing about Keke's confrontation with the ministers, they decided it was time to speak. They organized a peaceful demonstration to demand fair treatment from the government. Not violence. Not rebellion. Just a march of dignity. Thousands gathered in the market square. Men, women, children, grandmothers, grandfathers. They carried hand-painted signs reading, "We are Ashejirians too," and "Equal rights for all." Keke stood among them. Not leading. Not commanding. Just present. He wore a simple shirt. He carried no microphone. He held no banner. He was simply one voice among thousands. The march moved slowly through the streets. People sang hymns and traditional songs. They clapped rhythmically. They prayed aloud. Their voices rose together like a gentle river, powerful in its persistence. Soldiers lined the roads, watching with hard faces. Their hands rested on their weapons. Their bodies were tense. But the demonstrators did not provoke them. They did not shout insults or throw stones. They simply walked forward with dignity. Keke's heart swelled with pride. This was not chaos. This was strength. This was beauty. But hundreds of miles away in Mohono, in a dimly lit security office, a minister watched the live footage on multiple screens. His face showed no emotion. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Disperse them," he said coldly. "Use whatever force is necessary." The officer hesitated. "Sir, they are peaceful. Families with children. I gave you an order. Execute it. Now." The line went dead. Within an hour, everything changed forever. The first tear gas canister landed in the center of the crowd without warning. It hissed violently, spewing thick white smoke that burned eyes and choked lungs. Screams erupted. Children coughed and cried. Mothers grabbed their babies and ran blindly. Panic spread through the crowd like wildfire out of control. Soldiers advanced quickly, shouting commands through megaphones. Rubber bullets fired into the air with sharp cracks that sounded like real gunfire. People stumbled and fell. The peaceful march became chaos. Keke saw an elderly woman collapse, gasping for air. He ran to help her to safety. Then he spotted a young boy, maybe 9 years old, frozen in terror as the smoke surrounded him. Keke didn't hesitate. He ran through the gas, scooped the boy into his arms, and used his own body as a shield. A rubber bullet struck Keke hard in the shoulder. Pain exploded through his body, but he didn't drop the child. He carried him away from the violence. Blood soaked through his shirt. People surrounded him, crying, asking if he was okay. He nodded through gritted teeth. "I'm fine. Help the others. Please." By evening, the streets were empty. But the damage was done. That night, government-controlled newspapers printed bold headlines designed to destroy Keke's reputation. Keke incites violence in Lower Plains. Radical leader causes dangerous unrest. Is Kwame Kani a threat to national security? The articles twisted every fact. They said Keke had organized the march to destabilize the region. They painted him as power-hungry and dangerous. Keke sat alone in his office, staring at the lies printed in black and white. His shoulder throbbed with pain. His heart ached with betrayal. They were not just fighting him anymore. They were trying to erase him. The government called for dialogue. They said they wanted peace and understanding. They invited Keke to another meeting to discuss solutions. Despite his doubts, Keke agreed. He traveled to Mohono with 3 respected community leaders, hoping for genuine negotiation. They entered the same government building, but the atmosphere had changed. It felt colder. More hostile. More dangerous. The ministers sat across from them with unreadable expressions. They asked questions that seemed reasonable at first. "What exactly do you want for the plains people?" Keke answered honestly. "Fair treatment. Infrastructure. Economic opportunities. Basic dignity. And you believe we have not provided these things?" "I believe the plains have been systematically neglected for decades." The minister's jaw tightened. "That is a very serious accusation." "It is the documented truth." The conversation circled endlessly. Keke remained calm. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult anyone. He simply spoke truth backed by evidence. But what Keke did not know was that every word was being recorded. And not just recorded, edited. Manipulated. Cut and rearranged. They took fragments of his statements, removed context, and created something sinister. They made him sound like a revolutionary calling for violence. When Keke left the meeting, unease settled in his stomach like a stone. Something felt wrong. That night, in a private residence guarded by soldiers, a minister played the edited recording for senior military officers. In the doctored version, Keke's voice said things he never said. Dangerous things. "The government must fall. We will take what is ours by any means." The officers listened in tense silence. Then one spoke gravely, "This man is a serious threat." The minister smiled with satisfaction. Exactly. Within days, a massive propaganda campaign was launched against Keke. It was everywhere, impossible to escape. On radio stations. In newspapers. On television broadcasts. Even on posters plastered across walls in every city. Keke, patriot or traitor? Does Kwame Kani want to divide Ashajiria? The man planning civil unrest. People who had never visited the plains, who had never met Keke, began believing the lies. They repeated them in markets, in taxis, at dinner tables across the nation. "I heard Keke is dangerous. I heard he wants to break the country apart. I heard he's working with foreign enemies." The lies spread faster than truth ever could. Keke's father called him late one night. The old man's voice shook with fear and sadness. My son, they are destroying you. You must stop this work and come home. I cannot stop now, father. If I walk away, everything we have built will collapse. The people will lose hope. Silence stretched between them. Then his father spoke softly, his voice breaking. Then may God protect you, my son. Because no man will. Keke ended the call and sat alone in darkness. He knew his father spoke truth. He knew the danger was real and growing. But he also knew that some things in life are worth dying for. And the dignity and freedom of his people was one of those sacred things. The walls were closing in. But Keke would not run. He would not hide. He would stand. And if necessary, he would fall. But he would not abandon his people. Trust is a fragile, precious thing. It takes years to build but only seconds to shatter completely. Keke learned this painful truth the hard way. Someone close to him, someone he trusted deeply, was secretly betraying him to the government. Private meetings were being reported. Future plans were being leaked. Strategy discussions were being recorded and delivered to his enemies. At first, Keke refused to believe it. These were people he had worked alongside. People he had helped. People he considered friends, even family. But the evidence became impossible to ignore. A leaked document. A secretly recorded phone call. Information only his inner circle possessed appearing in government files. One night, an unmarked envelope appeared at his door. Inside was a single sheet of paper listing every private meeting Keke had attended in the past 6 weeks. Every person he had spoken to confidentially. Every plan he had made in secret. At the bottom, written in blood-red ink, were chilling words, "You have a snake in your house." Keke's hands trembled as he read it. His heart pounded with anger and grief. He needed to know who. He had to know. He called an emergency meeting with his 10 closest associates. They gathered in his office, confused and concerned. Keke looked at each face carefully. Studying. Searching. Someone in this room has been working with the government against us, he said quietly. I don't know who yet. But I will find out. The room fell into heavy silence. 10 faces stared back at him. 10 voices proclaimed innocence. 10 pairs of hands gestured denial. But somewhere in that circle of trusted friends, guilt was hiding behind a mask of loyalty. Keke folded the paper and placed it in his pocket. That is all. They filed out slowly, confused and worried. But one person walked a little slower. One person's hands shook just slightly. One person could not meet Keke's eyes. The betrayer was among them. Despite everything, the propaganda, the betrayal, the threats, Keke refused to hide or retreat. He refused to be silenced by fear. One Saturday afternoon, he stood before thousands gathered in the market square. People came from every corner of the plains. From distant villages. From neighboring regions. Young and old. Rich and poor. United. Keke stood on a simple wooden platform. No fancy sound system. No elaborate stage. Just his voice and his conviction. He spoke calmly, clearly, with deep love shining in his eyes. My brothers and sisters, we are not asking for war or revenge. We are asking for fairness. We are not demanding to be treated like royalty. We are asking simply to be treated like human beings. The crowd roared agreement, thousands of voices becoming one. They say we are rebels. They say we want to tear the nation apart. But I ask you, who divided us first? Who built roads and schools everywhere except here? Who created opportunities for everyone except us? The government, the people shouted back. Yes. But we will not respond with violence or hatred. We will respond with dignity. With hard work. With persistence. We will continue building. Continue growing. Continue rising. And one day, they will have no choice but to acknowledge our humanity and our rights. The crowd erupted. Women waved their wrappers high. Men raised their fists to the sky. Children clapped until their small hands hurt. Keke's words filled them with courage. With hope. With determination. But far away in a cold government office in Mohono, a man in an expensive suit watched the speech on a small television screen. His face showed no expression whatsoever. He picked up a pen and wrote a single name on official paper. Kwame Kani. Then beside the name, he drew a small symbol, a mark that carried only one meaning in government circles. Elimination. The death sentence had been decided. Now it only needed to be executed. It happened deep in the night when the world was sleeping. Keke was in his bedroom when the sound of shattering glass exploded through the darkness. He sat up, heart racing. Voices shouted outside. Boots thundered. Wood splintered under force. His door burst open violently. 6 soldiers poured in like a flood of violence. They grabbed him before he could speak or resist. They dragged him from his bed, pulling his hands roughly behind his back. What is this? Keke shouted. What have I done? What are the charges? They did not answer. They did not need to. This was not an arrest. This was an abduction. His mother ran into the hallway in her nightgown, screaming his name. His elderly father tried to stop the soldiers, placing his frail body between them and his son. A soldier shoved the old man aside brutally. He crashed against the wall and collapsed, clutching his chest, his face twisted in pain. Father! Keke shouted desperately, struggling against the iron grip holding him. Father, please! A soldier struck Keke hard across the face. Blood filled his mouth. His vision blurred. Pain exploded through his skull. They dragged him through the house and threw him into the back of a military truck like a sack of grain. The last thing he saw was his mother kneeling over his father's body, screaming for help, her hands covered in tears. The truck door slammed shut with terrible finality. Complete darkness swallowed him. As the vehicle roared away into the night, one soldier leaned close to Keke's ear and whispered with cruel satisfaction, "Your father won't survive the night." Keke's soul shattered. Rage. Grief. Helplessness. All of it crushed him. But he did not cry. Not yet. He would save his tears. While Keke sat chained in a dark underground cell, another meeting was taking place in secret. Not in any government building. In a private mansion on the outskirts of Mohono, surrounded by high walls and heavily armed guards. 7 powerful men gathered in a room lit only by dim lamps. They smoked expensive cigars. They drank imported whiskey. They spoke in quiet, confident voices. These were not elected officials. These were the real power behind Ashajiria. The men who controlled governments from the shadows. The men who decided who lived and who died. One man with a scarred face spoke first. Keke is becoming a symbol of resistance. If we kill him now, quietly, we risk making him a martyr. His legend will grow. An older man with silver hair nodded slowly. True. But if we let him continue living, he becomes a revolutionary leader. Either way, we have a problem. The youngest among them, a wealthy businessman with cold, emotionless eyes, leaned forward. Then we do not kill him quietly. We destroy him publicly. We make him look like a criminal. A terrorist. A danger to the nation. We ruin his reputation first. Then we execute him. And no one will mourn him. No one will remember him as a hero. Silence filled the room as they considered this strategy. Then, slowly, one by one, they nodded agreement. The scarred man smiled with satisfaction. It is decided. We charge him with treason. inciting armed rebellion, plotting to divide the nation. We hold a tribunal. We sentence him to death. And we do it all legally, properly, so no one can question us. The silver-haired man raised his glass. To the law. The others raised their glasses as well. To the law. They drank deeply. They laughed. They celebrated. And far below, in a cold cell, KK sat in darkness, unaware that his public execution was already being planned in meticulous detail. 2 days later, KK was dragged before the tribunal. He had not been allowed to wash. He had not been given food. His clothes were torn and stained. His face was bruised and swollen. But his eyes remained strong and clear. The tribunal room was small and suffocating. 7 judges sat at the front behind a raised bench. Soldiers stood guard at every door. In the corner, a single candle flickered weakly. The head judge, a man with a deep, emotionless voice, began reading the charges from an official document. Kwame Kani, alias KK, you stand accused of high treason, inciting armed rebellion, conspiring to destabilize the national economy, and plotting to divide the sovereign nation of Ashajiria. How do you plead? KK looked at the judges. He looked at the armed soldiers. He looked at the candle struggling to stay alive in the corner. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, clear, and absolutely fearless. I plead not guilty. But I know this trial is not about guilt or innocence. It is about fear. You fear the people awakening. You fear change. You fear losing your corrupt power. The judges shifted uncomfortably. One banged his gavel sharply. You will answer only what is asked of you. KK smiled faintly. I have already answered. For the next 3 hours, they presented their case. Edited recordings that twisted his words. False witnesses paid to lie. Evidence manufactured from nothing. KK was not allowed to defend himself properly. His lawyer was not present. He could not call witnesses or present evidence. This was not justice. This was political theater. A performance. And the ending had been written weeks ago. When they finished, the head judge looked at KK with empty, soulless eyes. Do you have anything to say before we deliver our verdict? KK stood tall despite his chains. History will judge you far more harshly than you are judging me today. The judges looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Back in the lower plains, the people knew something terrible was happening. KK had vanished. His office stood empty and locked. His phone went unanswered. No one had seen him for days. Rumors spread like wildfire through the markets. They arrested him. The government took him. They are going to kill him. Fear and rage filled every heart. But the people did not riot. They did not burn buildings or attack soldiers. Instead, they gathered. Thousands upon thousands. In the market square, on the streets, under the open sky. They sat on the ground in peaceful protest. They held candles. They prayed. They sang hymns. Old women wept openly. Young men clenched their fists in helpless anger. Children asked questions their parents could not answer. One respected elder, a man with white hair and a carved walking stick, stood before the massive crowd. His voice was strong despite his age. My people, we do not know what will happen to our brother KK. But we know this, he gave us something precious. He gave us hope. He reminded us of our dignity. He showed us that we matter. The crowd murmured agreement, voices blending like a river. So we will not fight with weapons or violence. We will fight with our presence. We will shut down our businesses. We will close our markets. We will stop all economic activity until they release him or until they tell us the truth. And so they did. The next morning, the entire lower plains fell silent. No trading. No farming. No industry. Just silence. The government panicked. The national economy depended heavily on the plains. Now everything had stopped. An elder looked toward Mohona and whispered a prophecy: a hidden truth will soon be revealed. On the third day of the tribunal, something unexpected happened that would change everything. Keke was brought into the room as usual, chained and guarded. But this time, he was not alone. Another man in chains was dragged in beside him, barely able to stand. Keke turned and his heart stopped. It was Bodu. His childhood friend. His business partner. His brother in everything but blood. Bodu's face was swollen from beatings. His eyes were red from crying. He could barely lift his head. The head judge spoke coldly. Bodu Mensah, you have confessed to working with Kwame Kani to plan rebellion against the state. Is this confession true? Bodu's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Keke's word tilted. Bodu, what are you saying? What have they done to you? The judge continued without mercy. You have also confessed that you were the one who leaked confidential information to the government. Is this also true? Bodu's body shook with sobs. Yes. Keke felt as though his heart was being torn from his chest. Bodu. No. Why? Finally, Bodu looked at him. Tears streamed down his battered face. They threatened my family, Keke. My wife. My children. They said they would kill them all if I didn't cooperate. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Understanding crashed over Keke like a wave. Bodu had not betrayed him out of greed or ambition. He had betrayed him out of desperate love. Love for his family. Keke's anger dissolved instantly into profound sadness. His voice was soft and filled with forgiveness. I understand, brother. And I forgive you. Bodu collapsed completely, sobbing uncontrollably. The soldiers dragged him out of the room. The judges watched in silence. Then one spoke coldly, attempting to use the moment against Keke. His confession proves your guilt beyond doubt. This tribunal will now deliberate on your sentence. But something had shifted in that room. Even the judges had seen the cruelty of the system they served. Keke stood alone once again. Betrayed but forgiven. Broken but still standing. The judges returned after barely 50 minutes. That was how Keke knew the verdict had been decided long before the trial even began. The head judge stood slowly. The room fell into absolute silence. Even the candles seemed to stop flickering. Kwame Kani, alias Keke, this tribunal has carefully reviewed all evidence presented. We have heard witness testimonies. We have considered the charges brought against you. He paused dramatically. The silence stretched unbearably. You are found guilty of high treason, inciting armed rebellion, and conspiring to destabilize the sovereign nation of Ashajia. Gasps echoed through the small room. Soldiers shifted their weight. Keke remained perfectly still. The sentence of this tribunal is as follows: you will be executed by firing squad at sunrise tomorrow morning. May God have mercy on your soul. The words hung in the air like poison. People in the viewing gallery began shouting. Chaos erupted briefly before soldiers restored order. But Keke stood calm. Unmoved. And then, something unexpected happened. He smiled. Not with happiness. Not with surrender. But with strange, profound peace. Because he understood something the judges did not. His death would not end this story. It would ignite it. He had planted seeds across the lower plains. Seeds of hope. Seeds of courage. Seeds of dignity and self-worth. Those seeds would grow long after he was gone. The judges could not meet his eyes. They knew, in their hearts, that they had not achieved victory. They had only delayed the inevitable awakening. As soldiers led Keke away in chains, he turned back one final time. His voice was quiet but carried through the entire room. You can kill a man, but you cannot kill an idea whose time has come. Then he walked out, his head held high, his spirit absolutely unbroken. That night, while KK sat in his cell awaiting execution at dawn, something remarkable was happening in the courthouse above. A young clerk named Yo was working late, filing endless documents. He was exhausted, but his work was not finished. As he organized papers on the head judge's desk, he noticed something unusual. A folder marked, Confidential, KK Tribunal. It was partially hidden beneath other files. Yo hesitated. He was not supposed to touch confidential documents. But something, conscience, curiosity, or divine prompting, made him open it. Inside were documents that made his blood run cold. Detailed plans. Secret communications. Edited recordings. Everything laid out in methodical detail. The government had planned KK's downfall 6 full months before his arrest. They had carefully edited his speeches to sound dangerous. They had paid witnesses to provide false testimony. They had fabricated evidence from nothing. They had even scheduled the exact date of his execution weeks in advance. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed political assassination. Yo's hands trembled violently. His heart pounded like thunder. This was proof. Undeniable proof that KK was completely innocent. Proof that the entire trial was a fraud. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching in the hallway. Terror shot through him. If they caught him with these documents, he would be killed immediately. He quickly pulled out the most damaging documents and stuffed them inside his shirt against his chest. His hands shook as he carefully returned the folder to its exact position. The footsteps grew louder. Then passed by the door. Yo exhaled shakily. He waited 3 long minutes. Then he walked out of the courthouse as calmly as possible, though every instinct screamed at him to run. Once outside, he ran. He ran toward the lower plains. He ran toward the people. He ran toward justice with evidence clashed against his racing heart. Behind him, a soldier noticed the clerk running and frowned suspiciously. Stop him, the soldier shouted. But Yo was already gone, disappearing into the darkness. And the truth ran with him. By sunrise, the lower plains market square was packed with thousands of people. They had stayed awake all night in prayer vigil, singing hymns, holding candles, mourning together. They knew this was the morning of KK's scheduled execution. They felt helpless. They felt broken. Some wept openly. Others sat in stunned silence. Then, from the edge of the massive crowd, a young man came running. He was out of breath, his clothes torn, his face covered in sweat and dust. Stop, he shouted desperately. Stop. I have proof. I have evidence. People turned, confused. Soldiers moved toward him threateningly. But the crowd immediately surrounded him protectively, forming a human shield. Yo climbed onto a wooden platform, trembling but determined. He pulled crumpled documents from inside his shirt and held them high above his head. This is the truth, he shouted, his voice breaking with emotion. The government planned everything. They lied about KK. They edited his words. They paid false witnesses. He is innocent. Completely innocent. The crowd erupted into chaos. Shock. Anger. Desperate hope. All mixed together in a storm of emotion. Yo began reading the documents aloud, his voice growing stronger. Every lie exposed. Every manipulation revealed. Every dirty conspiracy laid bare for all to hear. One elderly woman screamed, "They are murderers trying to kill an innocent man." An old man raised his walking stick and shouted, "We must stop this. We must save him." The crowd surged forward like a massive wave. Not with violence or weapons, but with unstoppable moral purpose. Soldiers tried desperately to block them, but there were simply too many. Thousands upon thousands of people marched toward the prison. They marched toward the courthouse. They marched toward truth and justice. And in that moment, the government realized something terrifying. They had tried to kill one man. Instead, they had awakened an entire nation. The truth was no longer hidden in secret files. It was in the streets, in the voices, in the hearts of the people. And nothing could stop it now. The government building in Mohono descended into absolute chaos. Ministers ran through marble hallways, shouting into phones. Documents were hurriedly shredded. Emergency meetings were called and immediately cancelled. The Minister of Security screamed into his phone, "How did this happen? Who leaked those documents? Find him and silence him immediately." But it was already too late. The evidence had spread everywhere. Radio stations broadcast it. Newspapers printed emergency editions. The truth was unstoppable now. Outside every government building, tens of thousands of people gathered. They came from the lower plains, from Mohono, from every region of Ashajiria. They were no longer divided by ethnicity or region. They were united by one demand: justice for Keke. They chanted his name like a prayer. Keke! Keke! Free Keke! Inside the military prison, the firing squad had been assembled in the courtyard. Keke stood against a stone wall, his hands bound, his eyes closed in prayer. The commanding officer raised his hand to give the execution order. But before he could speak, another officer burst through the door, running at full speed, shouting frantically, "Stop! Stop the execution immediately!" The soldiers lowered their rifles, completely confused. The officer was breathing hard, sweat pouring down his face. The people know everything. The entire nation is in the streets. If we execute him now, this country will explode into revolution. We cannot proceed. At that exact moment, the prison gates were overwhelmed by the massive crowd. They poured in like an unstoppable flood. Guards stepped aside, unable and unwilling to shoot their own people. The crowd found Keke still standing against the execution wall. Hands reached for him, not to harm, but to free him. They cut the ropes binding his wrists. They lifted him onto their shoulders. As Keke emerged from the prison into brilliant sunlight, the crowd erupted in celebration. Women ululated joyfully. Men wept with relief. Children jumped and danced. The ministers watched from high windows, their power crumbling before their eyes. 3 ministers immediately resigned. 2 fled the country that very day. The rest faced criminal investigations. The corrupt government fell. Not through violence or warfare, but through the unstoppable power of revealed truth. 6 months later, under intense international pressure and nationwide protests, Ashajiria held free and fair elections for the first time in decades. From the lower plains emerged a new leader, Itahoheri Oki. A humble teacher. A man of integrity. The first person from the marginalized plains to lead the nation. The old government, desperate and corrupt to the end, refused to accept the results. They tried to cling to power through legal manipulation. But Keke himself stepped forward. He appeared on national television and spoke with quiet authority that could not be ignored. The people have spoken clearly. Democracy must be honored. Step aside peacefully. International observers stood behind him. Foreign governments issued warnings. The military refused to support the old regime. The corrupt leaders had no choice. They surrendered power and fled into exile. President Itahoheri Oki was inaugurated in a ceremony attended by hundreds of thousands. The entire nation celebrated. The forgotten plains now led the country. But when offered positions of power, minister, advisor, senator, Keke declined everything. He refused titles. He refused wealth. He refused political office entirely. Instead, he quietly left Ashajiria and moved to a distant country, seeking only peace and anonymity. People were shocked. Why would he leave, they asked. After everything he sacrificed. But those who truly knew Keke understood. He had never wanted power. He had only wanted justice for his people. Now that they had it, his work was complete. Years later, in the lower plains, children gathered under moonlight to hear elders tell the story of Kwame Kani. He was the man who almost died so we could live, they would say with reverence. He walked away from everything the world considers valuable. And that is why he will never be forgotten. Keke's statue stood in the market square, not as a king or warrior, but as a simple man extending his hand to help others rise. The inscription read, "He loved his people more than his own life." And because of that love, a nation was reborn. His name became more than a name. It became a prayer. A symbol. A reminder that one person, armed with love and courage and truth, can change the world. Somewhere in a quiet country far away, Keke lived simply, content in the knowledge that his people were finally free. And whenever injustice arose in Ashajiria, people would whisper his name and find courage to stand. Remember Keke. Remember what he sacrificed. Remember that freedom is never free. That is the story of Kwame Kani. The freedom fighter who refused to die, even when they tried to kill him. His body may have walked away. But his spirit remains forever in the hearts of those he freed. If this story touched your heart, please share it with everyone you know. Let Keke's legacy travel across the world. Comment below, what did you learn from this story? I want to hear from you. May courage never die in your heart.